I'm decidedly on Team Punch-a-Nazi.
All right, you want to do the intro?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Hey neighbors, the handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company. The Bill Allen here with the Bill Allen. If you're on the East Coast, it's time for round 3. It's time to rise and roll. Rise and roll, yeah. We're doing that cutaway, right? So stupid. Yay, we're live.
All right.
We're live. Are we back?
All right. So you ready to get started?
Sure we are. Hey, everybody who's watching live on Twitch or YouTube. To all 206 of you right now, 204 of you right now that are watching, welcome. And today we have an incredible lineup of topics.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian, this morning I came up with tabletop topics when then I realized just table topics.
It's like the segments write themselves.
That's right. Table
topics. It's a thing.
It was during morning coffee.
So
we have a lot of table topics to go through. But before we get into the deep stuff, people, the deep stuff being like the actual discussion topics.
Sure.
I thought we'd start with some Kickstarter stuff.
Ooh.
And Dave reminded me to get my laptop so I could share things with you people. So I'm going to go to this. Dave, can you see my picture on the pic? Okay, good.
Black Hallows Townsfolk.
So the first thing is a few things on Kickstarter that were pretty cool that are going on. Some of them have a little more time than others, but this one I found, it's only 6 days to go, Brian. And this is Black Hallows Townsfolk. Now, Brian, you know I have a thing for minis, in particular for Townsfolk minis. And I need them in my life.
Sure.
Who's Dave, you ask?
Dave is our supreme commander in the booth.
David Carafa is the Wizard of Oz. He's the man behind the curtain.
It's true. You shouldn't pay attention to him because we do.
Yeah. But this Kickstarter, first of all, it had me at Townsfolk Minis.
Sure.
Brian. But let me just elaborate.
It's tough to find regular people minis.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of
Non-heroic
heroic people minis.
Right. Or monsters. There's tons of monsters.
You know, every once in a while you just want a tavern keeper or an old lady or a smith.
So let me show you. So first of all, this is by Jon Stynes. Black Hallows Townsfolk, a range of 28 millimeter or 32 millimeter high quality pewter miniatures for RPGs.
Pewter. Going old school. This is right up your alley.
So Dave, if you look at the screenshot, they're not hurting for backers. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they have $67,000 of a $13,000 goal. That's with 822 backers,
close to 4 times the goal. Yeah.
6 days
More
to go.
Close to 5
Brian, I'm telling you, and only you, because my wife doesn't watch our shows, I'm back in this. I haven't decided how much, but it's happening. Now, here's the question, Brian. This is two things that make this, I think, special. Number one is this part right here, range. Okay, so you could choose between 28 millimeter or 32.
I know you're going to go 28 because you've been doing this for years, and that's what all your other pewters are.
Well, and here's the thing. And the second part is pewter. This isn't just 3D printed plastic crap. Okay, so all of the manufacturing will be done in-house at Z1 Design, which means as soon as the first batch is ready, we can ship. So early backers can expect early delivery. We will deliver in order of backer number, and it is possible that we will ship the first batch before Christmas, which is great. Okay.
That's a really quick turnaround.
It is.
For like any Kickstarter.
Exactly. Okay, so here's the whole thing. Black Hallows is actually a game that they're developing, and these are minis for that game.
Oh.
Now, they make a note that if you are buying this for the anticipation of the release of the Black Hallows game, that they use 32 millimeter minis in that. Game. But the fact that they offer this option is incredible.
That's rare. That
look at this size comparison. This is great because a lot of people who don't know about minis might not understand why
32,
size is such a big
28,
deal.
What's the difference?
Exactly. So
it's
here,
4 millimeters.
Dave, are you on the screen capture? Can you see my cursor circling this? So there's a 32 millimeter. That's a rather large, heroic looking commoner. Then there's a 28 millimeter Reaper mini. Then there's a 28 millimeter War Machine. I don't know their stuff, but that's about right. And then 28 millimeter Townsfolk. So here's the thing, Bri. I have really old minis, like from the 70s and 80s that are 25 millimeter, and they are just tiny in comparison.
Yeah, they all look like halflings.
They do. They're kind of smaller. Then I have some 28s and I have some 30s.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the 28 millimeter Townsfolk as being the perfect complement to my different size minis that I already have.
Sure.
Now, the other thing that they're offering, Brian, as a what do you call it, a pledge bonus unlocked feature thing, is the 75 millimeter resin mini. So you could get these guys in which is just, that's like GI Joe size, I think. 75 millimeter is huge.
Yeah, it's like the Star Wars figures, right? Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's not going to be something that you play at your tabletop game. But if you're a collector, you like having display stuff. We know some people like that. Yeah. Danny Romero. People who like having basically statues, and then they enjoy the process of painting and then displaying those. I think it's just an extra feature. Will I do that? No, I don't have enough room for extra crap.
And that's extra stuff your wife could see.
Yes.
And ask questions as to where you got
We don't want her to see that. So, and then they have some like heroic things. So here's the pledge. This is the cool stuff. They have a bunch of add-ons, right? So the main pledge is the Townsfolk. You get 14 pewter miniatures in a choice of 28 or 45 50, pounds is like maybe $50, 55 or $60, which comes out to be about $4 a pop and change. That's still pretty damn good.
It's a pretty good price
for high quality minis.
I know you can get even cheaper. Those plastic Nolzers,
those are like
which are nice. They're like $4 or $5 a piece.
So then you can get hero character add-ons. So they've got this druid. They've got
resin characters.
Well, then the resin. There's your big 75 millimeter guy. Yeah. So you just add that to the pledge. Then Brian, terrain and scenery.
Oh,
so they've got this add-on, the Market Cross, which I'm low-key thinking about getting because...
So let me ask you this question.
Why couldn't I just make that?
No. How many mortgages are you going to take out on your house for this Kickstarter?
I mean, come on. It's like $15.
Sure.
All right. Then this guy just looks cool. Old Mage. Here's the problem, though. It goes back to why I like Townsfolk. I have enough heroes. I have wizards.
30,000 wizards.
Yeah, I have a ridiculous number of wizards. Do I need to add on Old Mage? I don't. Even though he looks really cool. Do I need to add on Vanya the Bard? Maybe. I mean, she
could be she looks very just a minstrel. She doesn't have to be a bard.
She could just be a minstrel. And that's the thing. She is kind of Townsfolkish. If you look at this larger picture of her, she might just be, look, she's like bowing, like, thank you, after her performance. Dave, do you see that? Maybe she's just a very well-endowed performer.
Yes,
maybe.
But you don't see the tally on any of the cameras on your computer.
Okay. So, and she's playing a lute or a
lyre?
Yeah, something.
A cruth?
Yeah, some kind of stringed instrument. So, I mean, that's awesome. I don't need an extra druid. Do I need a dog? Probably not. Town guards, Brian.
You have a lot of town guards.
I do have a lot of town guards.
I don't know that you need,
but those look cool.
They do look cool, though.
I don't know. All right, so Townsfolk for sure. Maybe town guards, because you can never have too many town guards. All right,
scatter terrain.
Scatter terrain. Now, here's the thing. After unboxing the Mantic Game stuff, I'm pretty sure that I don't need scatter terrain. I don't need any little terrain.
Okay.
I have all of this.
I wasn't here for that. I didn't see that.
And then some. And Gallows, while tempting, I feel like that's a crafting project. So I think basically I'm going to back this. And I think most people that, if you have some minis and they're heroic minis, it's always nice to have some town minis. And man, this is a good deal. So that was the Black Hallows Townsfolk. It's got 6 days left. So if you're going to do it, you got to pull the trigger quick. The next one, Brian, is from some people that we know over at Absolute Tabletop.
Yeah.
And this is the adventure kit, Shadows over Driftchapel. Okay. It's a 5e compatible adventure kit. So what's an adventure kit? It's more than just a module with an adventure, right?
I'm given to understand, based off the advertisements I've seen on Mini Terrain Domain, that it adds a bit of Cthulhu level horror to your 5th edition games.
And locations,
Sure.
and it's more than just a storyline, a plot with some characters and NPCs.
It has some extra rule tables for like madness effects.
Yeah, and they
like Cthulhu style madness effects.
Right. Now, this one again, ridiculously low goal of $3,250.
Sure.
They blew past that. They're at 16,000. There are 13 days to go. And we know Absolute Tabletop. And we're in the process of getting a pre-release copy of this for playtest and evaluation purposes. And you had mentioned the horror element because one of their first in the series was Oath of the Frozen King, which was also another huge successful kit.
Yep.
And I do like the horror element, Brian, and I like the idea of the juxtaposition between the law and order of a land and what happens when a land has been corrupted or infiltrated by a nameless,
by nefarious
dark
agents.
Evil. Yeah, right. I mean, so let's take a look. So, what is an adventure kit? We provide the pieces. All you need is some paint, a little glue, and a steady hand. Prep light, improv heavy GMs enjoy the versatility and flexibility that adventure kits provide. So it's more than just the plot lines and the characters and the locations. It's kind of giving you a little bit of the other components. So this could include maps.
My guess is there's some extra tables. And we haven't seen a copy of it yet.
Right.
Largely because we've been dragging our feet. But my expectation is there's probably a lot of tables. There's some maps. There's some like town descriptions to kind of throw in. I would say it probably runs a little bit like Storm King's Thunder, where there's a lot of like descriptions of areas you can go, but it's a little light on the like hard and fast adventure component.
Right.
But that's just a guess.
Right.
So
well, and like the unlocks, I think, are where they bring in the kit component, where it goes beyond just adventures. So you've got the weapons, items, and trinkets art, madness reimagined. So that goes back to your kind of guidelines for how to deal with that. The expanded flintlock rules. So if you wanted your setting to be, in compatibility with this world, and you wanted to be able to use flintlock weapons, then they're providing that as well. And then a world map. So again, going into the art side of it. So a lot of those unlocks are really cool. There's more artistic stuff here. The landscape, battle scene, short stories. So it's all kind of about being able to bring more immersive environment into your adventure, other than just saying like, here's your storyline, here's your NPCs,
it allows the players to have more control over the setting.
Yes, and they're getting closer to unlocking the final two touchstones, if you will, and that's printable monster and NPC tokens, and the Gloam Gazetteer.
Gazetteer.
Is
that like a newsletter?
Yeah.
Cool.
Venture beyond Driftchapel with this expansive list of locations and points of interest to be discovered in the dwindling world of Gloam, plus tools to generate your own settlements.
Just from the reading of this, it feels a little bit like Dark Souls meets 5th edition. In terms of like the atmosphere that I'm picking up from this, which again, we haven't seen like a hard copy of. We're working on it. We'll know more as soon as we do. But it is one thing I'm excited about. I'll probably back this.
Yeah, and
at some level.
The nice thing is that, if you want to be like they call it the Crown's Guard level, it's basically you get your name in the book, you get the full color PDF, and you get the printer friendly PDF, which is you're basically getting the whole thing for $12.
Right.
And and
you get access to some of their private games.
Yes, and that's pretty sweet. Now, at the higher levels, you get a lot more.
Sure.
You get the physical soft cover book, and then at higher levels beyond that, you get more of the buy-in. But there's the value bundle, which is $75. You receive 5 retail priced physical copies of the kit. which is
Sure.
pretty
The reseller value.
right, pretty awesome. And you get all those things so that if you're a local shop,
Mhm.
and you have interest in this, you can basically help promote their setting and their world and their adventures through having these kits available for sale. So again, that one has 13 days to go, but if you're watching this live, check it out. And again, all the links will be posted as well. Brian, the last one popped up on my radar because it's also a Kickstarter related to gaming. And this one is from Wood Robot, and it's called GameChanger, the 4x6 board gaming table and more. Now, gaming tables are a thing, Brian. They're
a big thing.
People are paying thousands of dollars
Yeah.
for these fancy high-end
Yeah.
custom game
With
tables.
magnets and cranks
Yes,
and everything
and all this cool stuff, and underlighting and electrical outlets.
Yeah.
And people are also building their own. There are a lot
Yeah.
of DIY videos about how to make your own epic game table. What I found interesting about this is the game table and modular table toppers. So this company is producing these things so that you don't have to build or buy a whole new table. This is a table topper. So you could have your dining room table at home.
Sure.
You install, this is a quick like clamp on kind of system. You install their things and you all of a sudden have this awesome gaming table.
Fisher Price used to make this, except it was, instead of tabletop board games, it was a basketball hoop and a pool table and a ping pong table.
Yeah. All in one.
All in
right?
one. Yeah. You just like changed out the table topper. This is cool.
Yeah. So they have different sizes.
And this,
right?
this is a much more in terms of money, this is a much more approachable solution to having a gaming table. Because instead of a few $1,000s, it's a few hundred.
And they start off right off the bat, which I think was smart because it resonates with a lot of people. So there's a quote that says, "This is a very exciting Kickstarter. I've been wanting a real game table forever, but prices are just so high until now." And that I think sums up the solution that they're providing.
It's a little bit weird to see the words "a real game table."
Yeah,
but
but
I get it.
But the cool thing is that they have a variety of sizes. So they have like a 2x4. If you just have a coffee table, they have a 4x4 and all these different things that allow you to convert whatever your size of table is to this custom gaming table.
That's cool.
So the toppers convert, and they have all sorts of accessories that go with them. So they have these fold out, basically like these fold out components for the players and the DMs.
Cool.
To have a spot for character sheets, for rolling dice,
for your tablet, which we established last week is only made for D&D Beyond.
Yes, exactly. And then there are other add-on components. So here they have like a whole list of pledge level benefits and what you can choose, the size, that kind of stuff, table bundles. And then as I was scrolling down, I'm looking at they can wood stain match. Like it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's what they can do at this level is pretty amazing. There's one other component that I saw in the video that I'm trying to find now, because obviously you can customize it. You can pick your felt color, all that kind of stuff, right? Here we go. So they've got 4x6, 4x4, 3.5x5, and then 2x4. So these are all different kind of size options. And then the heights, they can have that set up so that you can have different height options. So they make either tables or table toppers, and there's just a plethora of options, right? So
that's cool.
If you don't have a dining room table and you just want to have I want to buy an entire table, the whole frame, the legs, everything, they do that. But they also have the toppers.
If you buy the whole table, do they have like an insert to make it a regular table?
Yes, which is pretty amazing. Cool. They also have DM screens. And so here's all these accessories: dice towers, cup holders, big pads, dice tray, big pad plus, card holders. So if you're doing card games, they have a GM screen, fold out GM screen, really nice wood with a lot of accessories, places for minis, dice, all that kind of stuff. The toppers, topper extensions, so if you need extensions, all of this really cool stuff.
Cool.
And then a ton of videos and examples and pictures, which I think is really important. If you're going to invest a couple $100 into something, you kind of want to see how it works. And they have all that stuff. And they even show it like, here's our table as a dining room table. And then boop, 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 like Transformers that converts into, your ultimate gaming table. So again, that one just kind of hopped on my radar. I was like, wow, this looks really cool. And I, was watching some of their stuff. So they have 21 days to go. And they're in good shape financially. They had a $35,000 goal and they're already at 181,000. And that's only from 311 backers, which is, to me,
That means people are putting
they're going like all in,
Yeah.
which is pretty
cool.
amazing. So they have 21 days to go. So if you're one of those people who is ready to pull the trigger on a gaming table, check this out. Or if you have a dining room table or something already that you play at, but you just like to have the top features with the accessories and the cup holders and those kind of things, check it out. There might be something in there for you. And once again, full disclosure, we don't get any kickbacks from any of these companies. So if you do, go to pledge, leave a comment and just let them know that, you saw their product or their Kickstarter on Rise&Roll. And we don't get any money or any benefits from that, but we just want, we'd like to know if you are responsive to these ideas and if there's anything that we're talking about, or if you know of any cool Kickstarters that you think
hit us up.
We should cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know.
All right. I will say that we are talking with Kickstarter as a company about getting some early access to some beta content through their gaming program.
Right.
So we can do some play testing and that kind of thing with Kickstarter, kind of co-branded with them. But the individual projects, we don't have any skin in the game beyond we think they're cool. So
bald guy, show us your ink. This is my ink. This is the ampersand from Dungeons and Dragons. So when I decided to get a tattoo, I tried to think of something that I would get that I wouldn't regret, and I feared a game that I've been playing for a long time.
Why do I feel like the person who asked for that is one of your students?
Probably
laughing in the next room.
Yeah. That was done by Dennis Klein in the Chicago area. He's a fantastic artist, and I'll be doing more business with him soon. Cool. Yeah. So, yeah. But anyway,
good content so far. Fun Kickstarters. We agree.
Hey, Spec Ops.
We're really excited about those 3 projects. Those look really cool.
Yeah. So, Brian, it's time to talk about table topics.
Table topics. It's a thing.
So we have some deep topics to delve into. And should we start with the mechanic stuff or with the social and emotional learning component? How about we start off with gatekeeping, and then we'll go into mechanics. All right. So Brian, I've heard this term. There are terms when you're involved in games online. Murder hobo. I didn't know what murder. Yeah. I've been playing this game for decades, and I had never heard up until like 3 years ago. I never heard what murder hobo was.
Yeah,
and then when I found out, I laughed and laughed because I'm like, murder hobo totally makes sense. Like that's what early adventuring parties.
That's what most adventuring parties are now.
Like you go somewhere.
Don't ask questions. Someone told you to kill a guy.
You kill it, and then you move on. You're a murderer, and you don't have a regular home because you don't care about that. You just want to adventure and kill things and get treasure. All right, gatekeeping. I've heard this term. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it on Facebook, and it's every time I see it, it's usually like something having to do with some argument between people and certain people care about certain stuff and they don't want certain people to be. What is gatekeeping?
So gatekeeping is not just a tabletop term, right? Gatekeeping is essentially any activity.
Yeah.
This includes like academic disciplines. This includes basically any activity where there is a group of people, predominantly white dudes, that want to keep an activity focused on predominantly white dudes and therefore pick and choose who they allow to participate with them. Whether that's just other white dudes or whether that's like the women I want to play versus the women that should get to play because everybody should get to play. Like it's that kind of concept. Like I get to control who is participating in my hobby. Right. And we've touched on this before, right? With these old school grognards who want to keep gaming to basements and back rooms at gaming stores because it's their hobby. They had to suffer through the satanic panic. They put their time in, and now they deserve to have kind of be the top person in this activity, right?
Okay. Let's go through. Let's role play, Brian. Let's go
Role
through
play.
a gatekeeping scenario.
Uh-oh.
I will be new middle-aged guy
Mhm.
who never played D&D back in the day, but
Sure.
had friends who did, and now would like to get involved in D&D. You be the gatekeeper,
Sure.
and you're the guy
I
at
mean-
the game store who is the gatekeeper, and I'm like the dad,
Yeah.
middle-aged guy who doesn't know anything
Sure.
but wants to get involved. So I'll, so hey, I heard you guys do like D&D here. I've never played. I had friends back in the day who did, but I never played. But I kind of wanted to get involved. Is that something I can do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe.
Okay, well, what
we do,
what
like,
what should I
programming
do?
of it. I mean, show up, have a book. I
Okay,
don't know, bring stuff.
cool.
Like,
I'll do that. Should
make
I?
sure you like know the rules before you come in.
Oh, I have to read the rules.
Yeah, that's otherwise it slows the table down. It's not conducive to.
Okay.
Blah, blah, blah.
So what book should I buy?
I mean, here's 7 books that D&D publishes that are all very important, but
Wow.
I mean, I guess the most important ones are these 3 that equal like 700 pages total, and it'll cost
And
you
I
$150.
Okay, so I should definitely read all those. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do I need anything else? Like, do I just?
I mean,
show
if
up?
you don't have a miniature, like, I mean, we usually play with miniatures. So
Okay, so I should buy a miniature. What about like those fancy dice?
Oh, you definitely need dice. Yeah. you
okay,
should.
like what? Just like a few?
like a full set.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so full set of dice, 3 books, a miniature, and then what do I just pay? I guess there was like a table fee. Is that?
You'd have
something?
to talk to the owner of the store about that.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, thanks for the help. I'll see you
Sure.
next week, hopefully.
Yeah.
3 months later, after I've given up on
Mhm.
reading 3 books, and given up on playing D&D. So the gatekeeper is, this is my new interpretation,
Mhm.
Brian. I'm seeing a lot of parallels between the gatekeeper and certain music subgenres.
Sure.
I remember growing up and being kind of like, I wasn't into punk rock. I wasn't against it. It just wasn't really my
Sure.
thing. But then every once in a while there'd be like a punk rock band who would put out a song that I thought was good,
Mhm.
but all their dedicated fans were like, what the F? They sold out. They
Right.
suck.
Because
And
they're
I'd
on
be
the radio
like,
now. Right.
you're just, you just like them. Now, I've liked this band since nobody knew who they, you know what I mean? Is that gatekeeping? Isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say that it's
Like
a little bit.
I'm not punk enough to
Sure.
wear this Danzig
Yeah.
shirt.
It's a little bit disingenuous for us 2 white dudes who are in the hobby to talk about gatekeeping, because largely gatekeeping affects people who aren't white dudes in the hobby.
Yeah, no, it
right?
doesn't affect me. No one's.
Like,
I mean, if somebody tried to
Um,
cock block me from playing a game, I would
Right.
laugh.
that's probably a bit of that little role play session was probably a bit over dramatic for 2 white dudes.
Right.
And I don't pretend to understand how
So let's
females
explore.
trying to enter the hobby.
Yeah. So
but,
girls entering the gaming the older you are, I think, the more foreign that is.
Mhm.
Like even now, I'm shocked
Sure.
to like
I will
meet
say,
people, dude, that are my age
right.
who are women, and most of them now are like moms and stuff.
Sure.
And they're like, "Oh, I played Dungeons and Dragons back in the day." I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah.
Like, because that stuff was in the
Yeah.
closet. Like,
Sure.
you didn't know who played.
And I have a little bit more knowledge of this vis-a-vis like video gaming, because I used to like be in MMOs with a lot of girls who would have to like they pretend they didn't have a mic so they couldn't talk in chat.
Just so they could
pretend
play
to
the
be
game
guys.
without being bothered.
Right. Like so they could pretend they'd always play like male characters.
Yeah.
So they could just play the game and pretend they didn't have a microphone and not be harassed by a bunch of idiots.
That sucks.
Like, yeah, like it's
sorry,
for an
sorry,
activity
women
that's
and
supposed-
minorities
right,
who
like,
suffer from gatekeeping.
for an activity that's supposed to be a social activity.
Yeah.
Forcing yourself into antisocial behavior to participate in it is garbage. It's awful. Like it's a terrible situation to be in.
Well, it's
I don't understand. Like I'm a white dude, so I don't understand like the end all be all of that experience. I don't have the slightest idea how like minorities deal with it.
I think in gaming we have the upper hand. We don't suffer from gatekeeping.
No.
But I think there is a way for and here's the whole point. The whole point is not for us to be disingenuous. The whole point of me exploring this topic is I want to understand it.
Right.
Number one. Number two, I think people in the community might want to understand it.
And how do we reduce it at our tables?
How do you reduce it? But also, the whole point of understanding is to make a change, right? And if the point is to make a change in our mentality as a collective, as a community, in the gaming community, if the whole point is to make a change, then we have to understand all sides.
Sure.
So you have to understand the gatekeeper side. You have to understand the people from whom, who are suffering from this. And
you don't have to sympathize with all sides.
You don't have to sympathize,
but
I think you have to understand
where the attitude is coming.
Right. So the attitude for the gatekeepers is, this is our hobby. We've owned this, like you said. We've lived with it. We've suffered through it. Girls can't play it. That kind of mentality is stupid, right? We know that. That's ridiculous.
Not just girls, trans people, minorities, whatever. And you see this all the time on like nonsense YouTube videos that talk about like, the big popular thing to hate on right now is the Miss Marvel trailer and how whatever, I don't really understand the argument against it other than like I don't want female superheroes.
Right.
Like I don't understand what the cover argument for that is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hold up. Right.
Yeah. And I, like you said, the same thing could be said for minorities.
Sure.
Like
the notion of like a black Superman has been.
I'm just thinking the notion of black people playing D&D.
Well, yeah.
I mean, for my generation, like when I grew up, I did not know any black people who played D&D.
Well, you lived in a predominantly white community.
Yes.
And that's like, unfortunately, like exposure is what helps that. And living in a fairly affluent suburb of a city means that you don't get exposed to folks that aren't affluent. Right. Yeah. And when you were growing up, I mean, that was a substantial indicator. Like race was a substantial indicator.
Yeah. And it just wasn't, and I mean, I'm not even saying at my own table, like any hobby stores and comic stores, like it was a predominantly where we grew up at that time in the 80s, it was just a predominantly white male thing. So that I think I understand is where the gatekeepers feel like, their thing. And whether, again, it's role-playing games or a music subgenre or comic book thing. Like the idea is like, this is my thing. You can't be a part of it. You are not, part of my community.
Right.
I understand why they feel that way, but I at the same time,
I don't know why
ludicrous.
You wouldn't. I don't know why.
It's ludicrous.
It is so hard to fill tables.
Yeah.
I don't know why you wouldn't want to jump on board with anyone who wants to sit at a table and learn a hobby. Like if you're not about including new people in your hobby, you're about killing your hobby.
Yeah.
Like it's got to grow or it's going to die.
Right.
And I think
D&D Spec Ops has said on the chat that it's kind of a sore subject. His best friend was black. He was his DM, and he was the best DM during his early years. And man, I mean, it is a sore subject because apparently it's something affecting the community. But that's why we're talking about it, because I legitimately didn't understand. First of all, the term, like I wasn't familiar with the term. I've seen it, heard it, but I didn't really know the backstory. Number two, I couldn't understand why people in probably my generation, like the older gamers.
It's not just your generation.
No, I know, but and there's younger ones, but like older gamers who, you lived through the thing, but like the thing is changing. The thing is changing. It's a bigger community, and yes, like. You suffered in the closet for all those years. You suffered ridicule, and people called you a nerd because you played.
So people wouldn't have to now.
Yes,
like
that's it. Like if they see the big picture, like we're in a world now where girls play D&D. Like this is great.
Right.
We're in a world now where other people in other countries and minorities play D&D and other tabletop games. Like we're in a renaissance, and you're gonna worry about controlling who plays or who's part of the community, who's a real gamer and who's
like,
not.
The thing is, the publishers don't care.
No.
Like the publishers care about sales.
Yeah.
And the more people that are included, you're not gonna like change Wizard's mind.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I mean,
there's a bunch of like YouTube bozos out there who are gonna
Right.
be like, oh well, the cards are stupid, and I don't like that the cards say there instead of his or her on them
right.
when they're talking about a player anymore. Like
Yeah.
that's the hill you want to plant your flag on. Like
Yeah.
you've been playing this game for 20 years and the use of a pronoun is going to be what makes you stop.
Yeah.
Like
no, it's
like-
absolutely
Magic the Gathering has issues with like card delamination and like those kind of issues, and you're going to be worried about like a pronoun use.
right.
Like
Well, and the other thing too is I think, how about this? How about, folks, we challenge ourselves
Right.
to new ideas, because role-playing games allow us to explore concepts not in reality in a safe way.
and there's research to back that up.
And how about we explore all these other things that maybe you don't know about, and you get to know more about them through role-playing games. I've learned a tremendous amount.
There's a ton of research out
about
there that
people.
says that tabletop role-playing games reduce xenophobia.
Yeah.
They increase social interactivity.
Yes.
They increase socialization. They're great for folks on the spectrum. They're great for, like the list goes on.
Yeah.
And you want to be the obstacle that keeps your hobby from getting real, like clinically valid support.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I don't
think-
see it. I don't understand it. I don't understand the mentality. I guess I see where they're coming from, but they're coming from a disingenuous place.
And I think it's unfortunate if gatekeepers can't open their eyes and see what a miraculous dawn renaissance that we're in right now. That, like you mentioned, they suffered through all that so that people can play. Like, I played in the closet. Nobody that I went to high school with, other than my inner circle of friends, knew that I played
That's
D&D.
not an old thing. Literally in 2006,
Yeah.
I was being told I was going to hell for worshiping demons.
Right. I had a comment on one of the YouTube channel, YouTube videos for D&D with high school students from a person who just started up a club. And this is a kid who started up a club for D&D and said that some of the parents think it's like evil and satanic or demonic. And what do I do? And my short response was, tell them that it's not. Tell them that it's just like a game like anything else, number one, and that when you're done playing it, you go back to real life. And then number two, write a really good story to show how your group adventures and how they fight evil, maybe, and invite the parents to watch.
Because I would say that
there's nothing to be scared of.
Most games are not about summoning devils to take over the world. They're about killing devils that are trying to take over the world. Right. Like if devils and demons are involved, they're the thing that you're fighting. They're not the thing that you're like getting on board with.
Yes.
So like I just don't.
And I again, I went through the satanic panic, and
through the height of it.
Fortunately, my parents weren't idiots. So I never had a problem. If anything, it was the other side of the spectrum. My mom credited D&D as a reason why my reading went up astronomically. I started off elementary school being horrible at reading and struggling with reading and writing, and my math and my basic literacy went through the roof.
Reading, writing,
my vocabulary, everything.
Thinking skills, vocabulary.
My dad nurtured it because I naturally, from playing D&D, had more of an interest in things like other cultures and religion and history. Well, that's like what he did, so he would give me these little, things. And here's the clincher. A lot of our best discussions were on the road on the way to church.
Sure.
So as a former priest and then a teacher, he had no fears about D&D being satanic or demonic, and I'm grateful that I had that opportunity to balance the craziness of what was going on.
And
in the 80s.
I think fortunately we've gotten to the point that like mainstream churches and mainstream religion has gotten over this notion. Right. And I think that's largely to the credit of things like Wizards of the Coast's publication strategies. It's to the credit of streaming and having more accessibility and access to the hobby. Danny
just logged in and has a neat comment regarding this whole gatekeeping thing. It's the same thing as Gamergate and what will happen with Comicsgate. Eventually, their noise is drowned out by the people who are inclusive and create some of the most fun results because of it.
I think it's important to
Good morning, Danny.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize a vocal minority when it shows its face.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think, I mean, this is going to have wheels because, like, they have big public of, like, you know, there's some events like Gen Con this year that caused some issues, and there are some events, you know, throughout the year that might cause, like, visibility.
Yeah.
But, like, you're bringing visibility to hateful nonsense anyway, and I think it's going to be recognized as hateful nonsense.
Right.
You know, like, it's just, I don't know. It just, like I said, I guess I understand where the attitude comes from, but it's not from a valid place. And it's not something that, like,
and I think
I want to give a ton of attention to.
Right. I think in the end, it's important for everybody else in who's entering the gaming community, whether they're, you know, a decades long veteran or, you know, relatively new, to just understand that, yes, this is just a game, but to a lot of people, it's a game that bridges so many more things.
Right.
And that it's a game that, in a lot of ways, unlike other games, tabletop role-playing games allow you to explore ideas, concepts, whatever it is, in an interactive storytelling
In
kind
very
of experience.
safe ways.
In safe ways.
In ways that are supposed to be safe.
Yes. And nobody owns it.
Right.
Nobody owns it. I mean, I've played now for 4 decades. I don't own anything.
Right.
Like, it's a mutual interactive experience. So
and I think we're all better because of it.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to talk now and shift gears from kind of more of the social thing to some more of the mechanical arguments, which there are tie-ins because there are people who enjoy mechanics and crunchiness and rule sets and charts and graphs and stuff. And then there are people who are less so on that spectrum.
More interested in the narrative.
Right.
And,
so, but there's nonetheless always been a debate, and there probably always will be, about rule sets and comparisons between different editions of games.
Right.
So we're not just talking about D&D.
Right.
I could.
I mean, that's obviously the game that we'll talk about most because it's the game we're most familiar with.
But even now on more recent levels, Call of Cthulhu, Vampire, you know, people get into a game at a certain point. Sometimes they get into the game and they move on to the next edition, and then they go to the next edition. Sometimes they cling to whatever edition they prefer most, or whatever they started with. So, what do you do about rule sets when your favorite game, like, what if I got this tattoo and then D&D just sucked? What would I, you know?
What if you got that tattoo during 4th edition, you mean?
Yeah.
But we kid. 4th, I have a soft spot in my heart for 4th edition.
But you know what I mean? Like, what do you do if a game changes so drastically that you don't enjoy the newest edition anymore? Do you go back, or do you do your own rule set? Like, talk to me about rule sets and alternative rule sets and the whole notion. Let's explore this topic.
I think you can do whatever you want because it's a game and it's your table. And I think as long as everybody at the table has the same kind of perspective on things, it doesn't really matter. Like, nobody, I've said it before, the ghost of Gary Gygax is not going to come and take your books away. Like, play whatever version of the game you want. Like,
just as a funny, because you mentioned that on my last video where I talked about alignment, there's like a 3-comment rant from one of the subscribers who's like furiously pissed about my exploration of alignment. And I don't know, like, if he just misunderstood. He admitted that he only watched 10 minutes of the video.
Well, that's probably the first problem.
And I was like, watch the rest of the video and then I will respond.
Right.
But he like went off about how, like, I was putting words into the mouth of Gygax, and 1st edition, you know, is there's nothing in 1st edition that excuses what 5th edition has done to take away alignment, and alignment's an important mechanic, and just like went on this rant.
Gygax doesn't own the game anymore, I guess.
I mean,
like, I don't know, like,
it reflects gatekeeping. It reflects, you know, a fixed mindset about
also,
how things should be.
If you want to incorporate a strict alignment system in your 5th edition game, incorporate a strict alignment system.
and that's the thing. Like I didn't take a stand in the video.
Right,
I just it
if
was
that's
like
something you want to do it.
Yeah,
Like,
all I did
don't-
was read the Old Testament and the New Testament. I never
Right.
said which one's better. I
Right.
never said. All I did was literally read
Yeah.
passages and compare. You know, and my statement, I guess, was that in first edition, alignment was a lot more important
Mhm.
than it is now in fifth edition.
then where it comes up on
Right.
like 2 pages of the text in 5th
Yeah,
edition. Right?
and that
Where there aren't
mechanically it was
class-
more important.
class distinctions for alignment or race distinctions for alignment.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's all right. So let's get back to rule sets.
Sure.
So
I
talk
guess
to me about rule sets, alternative rule sets.
all right. So I guess the preface statement here is, at least when we're talking about 5th edition, every rule set is an optional rule set, right? Like there's nothing.
Are you sure, Brian?
Look,
Are you sure people aren't going to pull out their book and argue with you?
I've talked to Tito and Crawford face to face, and I'm fairly certain. I've talked to Merles, and I'm fairly certain that all 3 of them would say, like, play with the rules you want to play with.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
make the game fun for you. Like, it's not about, and like, I think that there are issues. I think there are, I'm going to say it, there are some things in 5th edition that need help, right?
Yeah.
I think the crafting system is terrible.
What do you mean by the crafting system?
Like crafting items, like the notion of like
Okay.
having artisans tools and stuff.
Yes.
I think there's no value.
What is
in doing
terrible about it?
I think
are
there's-
they not specific enough about how it works?
I think it's too laborious, right? Like you have to spend X amount of downtime days to get X amount done, and it.
So
like,
if I am a jeweler,
right,
like I'm an artisan guild jeweler, what do I have to do to craft effective jewelry?
like you have to dedicate entire days to crafting.
And where is that rule set found? Player's handbook or DM's guide?
Player's handbook.
Okay. So how would you change it?
I would make a custom rule set. So we in Anathema have a custom rule set for like crafting magic items.
Yes.
Right. It's a rule set I developed, and it's a rule set that Chris uses on the Bard's Tale occasionally, but largely it's one of those things that only comes up when it's used, right? But I think the notion, and it's something that older editions have had issues with it too. And like the thing that comes to mind most frequently is like the 3rd edition rule for like the speak language skill, where you had to dump 2 skill points into the speak language skill to learn a new language.
Yeah, that sucked.
And that also seems bizarre to me, right?
Yeah.
Like the notion that you're either completely incompetent in the language or fully fluent. There's no middle ground, right? There's no checks for speaking language. You just buy a language. That seems absurd to me.
Yeah.
Right. But the same thing happens with like magic items, right? Like by the time that you craft a magic item, and like it's a little bit different because 5th edition is a low magic setting, so there aren't like gold list prices for magic items. But realistically, like if you were gonna make a healing potion, and the time and resources it took you to make a healing potion, you'd save less than 10 gold from than just buying a healing potion.
Right. And at a
Right.
certain point in your adventuring, you're going to have enough wealth to where taking the time to
Right.
craft anything is
Right.
not, there's no point to
It's
it,
not
right?
valuable. No. And I am, and I'm a nerd for crafting, right? Like that's I have a character through 3 editions now who focuses on being a crafter before an adventurer.
Mhm.
Right? Like that, and that's just me, but that's kind of where my feeling is on that particular system. Right?
Well, it's funny because I remember a certain push at some point for like a non-violent approach to the game where killing monsters and gaining treasure wasn't the only way that you could get experience. And
Sure.
that was also kind of during the MUD/MMO era
right.
of the late 90s and early 2000s with the web, where people wanted to play online RPGs where you could gain levels and experience
Right.
not killing things.
Right.
And there were crafting, like that became a thing. Like
Yeah.
you'd mine ore and then you'd
Right.
go
There
back
was-
to the forge.
there was a run in World of Warcraft when Mist of Pandaria came out where like the goal was to hit level 80 or whatever the level cap was before you left the starter zone. And you did that by like hitting like mining nodes and hitting herbalism nodes and getting 16 experience at a time. And I think like, I think that's the direction that like AL is going. I think that's the direction that Wizards is going. I think that's the direction that, a lot of these large publishers are going, because it's not about, and you brought it up earlier, this notion of a murder hobo, right? Like murder hobos aren't exciting to play. Like it ignores two major pillars of the game.
Yeah.
The notion of like navigating a situation socially instead of instead of through combat is one that I think is a big push, and I think that's why like AL awards you for hours played now instead of for monsters killed, right? Like and I think some of us have been doing that the whole time, but there's a hardline like mentality of some of these old school gamers that like if you don't kill the monster, you don't get experience. Right.
Well, I remember tracking it. Like we had tally sheets, and it was, you can't win in a tabletop role playing game, but we were all playing to win.
Right.
It was a race to see, and we literally had campaigns where some people would be an entire level above. And power gaming.
That's where power gaming comes from.
It's boring.
That's where
it's boring. And trust me, people, having played these games for years, yes, there's a short-term thrill to gaining levels, to gaining power,
but
to being the most powerful person in your party.
If there's no threat, there's no drama.
Right.
And if there's no drama, you're going to stop playing. Like if all you have to do is show up and roll dice and then walk away, like if there's no stakes in the game and nothing on the table, what are you playing for? You know what I mean? Are you just playing to like, at some point, like, you've built a successful character mathematically at the time that you build the character.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to play test that build.
Well,
and congratulations, you win D&D. Let's move on.
Yeah. And I think that, for people who maybe are just getting into the hobby, it's hard if you come to a group. Say, for example, you're a newbie and your first group is, you find some group through Meetup Online or some Adventures League, and everybody is playing, kind of power gaming. If that's your first impression of how a game should work,
you're probably not coming back.
You're probably,
And for a system like AL that's focused on incorporating new gamers and bringing new people into the fold, that's like, I've talked to, before we shot the last 3 episodes of the Bard Cell, I was talking to Chris and Elise and Latia and saying like, I would like to run a game where everyone at the table had to pick one class, couldn't multi-class, and just had to play that class.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Because that cuts out the ability to like, oh, I'm going to take 2 levels of fighter so I get action surge, and then 3 levels of warlock so I can get this, and then 2 levels of paladin so I can get an aura and smite abilities. Like it cuts out that ability to like look at the whole map and pick and choose the abilities you want.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why multi-classing in 5th edition is an optional rule set.
Yeah.
It's not by default, you are not allowed to multi-class.
Okay, let's talk on another optional rule set, Brian. Flanking.
Flanking is a garbage rule set that power gamers,
all the power
gamers, and
all of the power gamers
are real excited about. And we've had this conversation before. I don't like the flanking mechanic because I think it makes the game too tactically focused and not focused. It becomes an ROLL playing game instead of an ROLE playing game.
I absolutely agree.
Sure.
And knowing that I agree, there's still this inner voice inside of me that's like, I want tactical things because I like a little bit.
But here's what
I like a little bit of power gaming. I like the role playing and acting part.
Here's what I will tell you about the flanking rule, right? Is if you allow for flanking in your game, expect less diversity in the characters at the table. Because if flanking gives you advantage, you're never going to see things that you're going to take away from kobold racial abilities that give people advantage.
Right.
You're going to take away from the notion of like pack tactics, and you're going to take away from the notion of, these other things that like there are 1,000 ways to get advantage in combat. I don't know that you need to just add another one that's as easy as I go around him, right?
Right.
And I think if you're going to incorporate the flanking rule, you have to bring back the notion of the 5-foot step for attacks of opportunity.
Yeah.
Instead of like, I only provoke when I leave his threatened square.
Right.
Because all you're going to do is promote people like getting up to something and walking around it.
Yeah, I'm curious why they didn't integrate that as a balance or a foil to
To the
flanking rule.
Yeah.
But what other optional rules and rule sets are, at the center of debates? I mean, alignment's not really an optional rule set. It's just that 5th edition doesn't focus on it that much more.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, alignment, like I said, no one is telling you can't play with alignment.
Yeah.
Like, no one is saying, like, alignment is irrelevant to your game. Like, as a DM, you get to decide.
Right.
And I don't think, like, I've never been a guy who, like, used alignment as a hard and fast rule. Like, you can't do that because it's not your alignment.
Yeah.
My approach was, if you do that, that's going to affect your alignment, right?
Yes.
Like, alignment isn't a static thing. It's based off the actions of a character. And this goes back a little bit to, like, the notion of, like, evil races, right? Where, like, if you were a drow, you had an evil alignment, or if you were an orc, you had an evil alignment, or if you were like a tiefling, because you came from the evil planes, or you descended from the evil planes, you had an evil alignment.
Right.
And I think that might be one of the reasons that they tried to step away from it, is because the notion of, like, like Drist is the world's most popular D&D character. Right. And he's a non-evil. That might be one of the reasons. But I think that expands to things like kobolds, who are typically seen as evil, or tiefling as a main player race, right?
Yeah.
Like, if an entire race is it has to be locked into this one alignment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people are going to play that race very often.
Right. Will they? Yeah.
In terms of other optional rule sets, like feats are an optional rule set. They're not automatic.
Yep.
It's not implied that you can play with feats. Sometimes you just play with ability score improvements. I tend to like feats because I think it gives your character a little bit more diversity, and it pulls away from the notion of power.
Let me ask you about the feats. Are there any races that could start off with a feat other than the human variant option? And if so, why not?
I'd say no, only because of the narrative behind the books, right?
So what? Go into detail. Why?
Yeah. So the reason
that there's literally one racial option.
Sure. The reason that the human variant gets a feat is because humans are kind of a baseline. They don't get a lot of extra stuff.
Okay.
Right. I guess, like, the standard human gets a +1 to all of their abilities because I think in the book it talks about them being, like, versatile and, like, having a well-rounded upbringing. And then to the human variant, you give up a lot of that in exchange for a feat and a skill. I don't know that feats are necessary, right? I don't know, like, I don't think there's any race aside from orcs and kobolds, and I'll get there in a second, that is decidedly weaker than any other race.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know that, like, you need the bonus feat to catch up. And the reason I exclude orcs and kobolds is those are the only 2 races in 5th edition that get a penalty to an ability. And I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's there. There aren't a lot of, like, benefits for those penalties. I know kobolds get, like, a beg, grovel, and cower ability that gives their allies advantage. They get pack tactics and dark vision, but I think that might be it. They've even lost their proficiency with trap making that they've had in the past.
But why? Why would somebody make? I guess the question is like, are people making kobolds because of the advantages and the optional rule set components, or are they doing it for the role playing experience?
Sure, and I would say that almost anyone making a kobold is doing it for the role playing experience, right? But at some point, it is a mechanical game. Right. As much as I want to push the narrative focus and the role playing focus, at some level it becomes a mechanical game where it's okay to give up benefits to focus on narrative. But when you're actually taking penalties for the sake of narrative, maybe it makes you rethink your character. You know what I mean?
I mean,
Like, even if you're narrative focused, even if you're role-playing focused, like, is this a burden you want to bear for the sake of a role-play focused character?
and are we speaking socially? Like, you've decided to play a drow?
No, I mean mechanically.
On the surface.
Like, I would say that
Or
with the popularity of like the Drizzt series and like everything else, I don't think drow are hurting for players.
Okay.
I would say the mechanical penalties. So
okay.
kobolds.
Yeah.
Like the -2 to strength is substantial. And I
Yeah.
think maybe that's just because and WebDMs picked up this idea also,
Right.
that wizards they overstate the importance of physical attributes.
Yeah.
Because they're used to a combat focused game.
Right.
Right. And I think when we look down the line at a more narrative focused game, which looks to be the way that they're going with not only ADL, but the new books that have a lot of social components in Dragon Heist.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen Dungeon of the Mad Mage, but I would assume that they're going to focus on exploration and social there.
I actually saw it. It was pretty awesome.
Did you?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, right. You got me. But as they move to a more narrative focused game, I think it'll be more acceptable. It won't be as cumbersome to play a kobold, right?
Right. And
it'll be more cumbersome to play like an orc that gets a penalty to intelligence or charisma, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I don't know. The reason I get irritated with it is I don't know why they made the decision unilaterally to get rid of penalties and then added these 2 races that have penalties. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, they could have just like not given them as many bonuses.
I think that was one of the
let
things.
It happen. That was one of the coolest things about the player's handbook when it came out.
I was shocked.
Like, there's no penalties. I can play a dwarf and not be a jerk, right?
Yes.
I can play an elf and not be failing Constitution saves all the time.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so to step away from that, I think was a misstep. But like I said before, I don't work for Wizards. They don't pay me to make decisions for them. So,
no. I mean, I think it's. I think it will be interesting to see how this evolves. Sure. I think 5th edition is not new, but it's still new. Right. And I think that.
And they're still exploring the boundaries of what they can do within 5th edition.
Right. Now, every table, because you brought up an important point that I think is relevant for people that are experienced to be reminded of, as well as new people joining the pack. And we have some people on the chat who, some of them are newer, some of them are older gamers. Mm-hmm. So first of all, thanks for tuning in, guys. But a couple
real
of things
quick, if you're new in the chat, click subscribe and find out when else we're on.
Yeah, and click that notifications bell. So one of the things, though, that I think we need to be reminded of regularly is that every group can choose collectively. Sure. And if you're in a group, typically people just assume that it is the DM who decides what rule sets are used or not used. And that's sort of true.
That's sort of true, but if you're a player at a table,
if all the players at a table decide, hey, we want to use the flanking rules, it shouldn't the DM be like, okay.
Well, that, and like if a DM doesn't want to play with the flanking rules, like that should be upfront from the beginning, right? Because if a player doesn't want to because first of all, if a DM is going to go against the wishes of an entire table based off flanking rules, that's not just an indicator of the DM's willingness to play with flanking rules most of the time.
Right.
It's also an indicator of the DM's willingness to like go with the flow and do what the table wants to do.
Yes.
And I could see a DM saying like, okay, we'll play with flanking rules, but we're going to get 5-foot step rules back in as well as like a compromise. Right. Because I don't want to deal with like people circling around character. Like it just makes combat trivial. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that means that you find other benefits for characters that are being penalized because flanking is an option. You find some other perk for a character that would have pack tactics. You find some other perk for a character that has like the beg cower and grapple ability.
Right. Right.
But ultimately, if a DM is going to unanimously decide to go against the wishes of everybody at their table, that says something about the people's expectation at that table.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's,
And from a player's perspective, like
they should
you
have
don't
some
have to
input.
run. Well, you don't have to run the flanking rules, but I don't have to sit at this table.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like at some point, like if I'm not going to have fun with this hobby activity, I'm going to go find somewhere I can have fun with this hobby activity.
And it's more than just, obviously it's more than just flanking rules. There's,
right. That's an easy example.
The question of races, right. So the whole notion of PHB +1, Player's Handbook +1. What does the +1 mean? It means
one other book. And
right?
the reason for that, the reason that AL pushes that is because all of the other books are only play tested against the Player's Handbook. They're not play tested against each other.
Right.
And so they don't have a real good grasp. I'm sure that at some level they do. But mechanically speaking, there's not a balance between somebody who plays straight out of the PHB and somebody who plays out of the PHB plus these spells, plus these feats, plus this class archetype, plus this like at some level, like it's about making sure everyone is on the same page. And it still doesn't happen, right? Because there are still power builds that people kind of hack their way into and figure out. But at some level, like you can't stop it. But you can do things like limit the amount of resources, which keeps things moving, right? Like if you watch a 5th edition game, it will go a lot faster than a 3rd edition game at the same level because you're not searching through 5 books, you're searching through 2.
Yeah.
And if you want proof of that, go back and watch our awful 3rd edition web stream versus our less awful 5th edition web stream.
Yeah.
And watch the amount of time it takes to get through one round of combat.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
2, it narrows the focus and forces players to be more creative about their characters.
Yeah.
Like they don't have the world to look at.
Yeah.
They have 2 books and they have to really focus on like what interesting combinations can I pull out of these 2 resources? Well, what about these 2 resources?
Right.
What about these 2 resources? And really have to pick and choose. And it puts stakes in the matter, right? All of a sudden there's an opportunity cost.
Right. And to be clear, people have commented often about season 1 of D&D with high school students because
everybody had to be human.
Everybody had to be human. And I explained and added text that, it's because of the continent that it was set in, all that stuff. But I truly believe.
And because I know you, I know that wasn't after the fact.
Right.
But it could have been. You know what I mean?
It could have been.
Like,
but the reality is that like I having all these different options for races is great. It's great. And yes, if I was a new player, I'd want to explore them. Just like just like a kid in a candy store. You want to try all the different flavors. But after you've eaten all the candy in the candy store, you come to a realization that any candy could be great. Like any race could be great and any class. And you don't have to overcomplicate it. You could pick a human fighter.
Right.
And I can make 1,000 different human fighters that are totally different. Not just based on background, but based on the character concept and their appearance and the weapons they use and all that stuff.
People ask me all the time to help them build a character. Like I was helping some of your season 3 kids build characters last week. And I asked him, I said, he goes, I want to be a warlock. And I said, I don't know how to help you. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, I don't know how to, that's not how I build characters. And he goes, oh, you don't build warlocks. And I said, well, I don't build warlocks, but that's what I mean is I don't start from a rule set.
Yeah.
And then come up with a concept.
Mm-hmm.
I start with a concept and fit the rule set around it.
Yeah.
Right. So when I came up with like Ron the Handyman Hutchinson, I knew where I wanted to go and I had to figure out the best way to get there. So human fighter, tavern brawler feat, grappler feat, guild artisan. Right. When people come to me and they're like, oh, I want to do this type of character, to me, it screams of somebody who's not going to be invested in their character.
Yes.
Like I start with the concept because if I start with a concept, I know where the investment is and I know that I will find a way to build it. And sometimes that means working with the DM to slightly alter things, right? Sometimes that means just like exploring all of the resources. But I would say that 5th edition, maybe so less than 3rd edition because of just the the dearth of books in third edition, but fifth edition still has a large range of opportunity to do basically whatever concept you want to do.
Anything.
And
I mean,
that comes from
so
the
fluid.
And that comes from the edition, and I think it's overlooked a lot, but the notion of a background is what makes or breaks a character in fifth edition.
I would largely agree. And if anything, I would say that they don't need more races or classes. They need just more backgrounds. And even then, you
And-
don't, because the archetype backgrounds that they provide can be expanded through your
In fact,
own
it's
narrative
choices.
choices.
It has specific rules, and this is part of rules as written. It's not
Right.
an optional rule set
Right.
to create a custom background. Like
Right.
you can just create a background. You
Right.
know, like you get 2 skills, maybe you get a language and a tool proficiency, and then you get a background feature, and it describes. You've got a dozen options to look at as
Yep.
like guidance for that feature.
Yeah.
Right. But I think like people overlook the background a lot, and I know it happens in AL all the time, where like the background feature gets overlooked.
And it's just a
And like
mechanic.
as a DM, when I allow a background feature to shortcut an adventure, I take heat because like, oh, you're not supposed to do that. Backgrounds aren't supposed to be that important.
Mhm.
Well, like if you're a criminal background and you have criminal contacts and you need to know where a thing is, like, yeah, your background is
That's
gonna
the
come
whole
up.
reason why you
Yeah,
do it.
Like
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things that like it's overlooked. It's looked at as a way to get like a couple of extra proficiencies.
Right.
And I think that people forget about all of the dearth of role-playing ability that is tied up in where you come from before you became an adventurer. And that's why our next show is going to be focused on like NPCs. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to be fighters and rangers. It's going to be hunters and artisans and like those types of people, because I think there's a lot of interesting data and information that can be brought out of a character based off of them being regular people.
Yeah. Well,
And then maybe adventurers.
so here's a good way to conclude the discussion about rule sets, because it also ties back into role playing. It ties back into keeping an open mind and not being a gatekeeper and thinking that you only have one way to play a game. And that is our collaborative storytelling experience. When I started up the Handyman campaign, which by the way didn't have a name. It didn't just start off as the Handyman.
Right.
It became that. It was just the campaign.
Right.
You came up with Ron the Handyman Hutchinson.
Who's a character I've played in third edition in 2006 and whatever.
I could have just left it as, okay, you're a carpenter. You know how to
Right.
work with wood. You have a hammer and you know someone at the guild. And that might have just been it. But instead of doing that, I looked at that and I thought, what's a cool organic way
Sure.
to use that background and integrate it
Right.
into the storyline?
Corruption in the cartography.
Right.
Skills.
So then,
Or in the
and
Carpenters
the Carpenters Guild became kind of a focal point of the initial adventures. Those NPCs became tie-ins to larger plot lines and threads, all of which you guys independently explored.
Mhm.
And then Schroeder, who made a bard, becoming your hype man and
Right.
basically becoming the skald of, telling the story and the legend of Ron the Handyman Hutchinson, is how one day your group had a name,
Mhm.
which I didn't even plan on doing, but you guys stopped an NPC and the NPC referenced the Handyman.
Mhm.
And then your characters and the group meta actually realized that you had become the Handyman.
Sure.
And that's when the campaign became.
And that's
and that
what
was
I
a
think-
year and a half into the game.
And I think that's the focus when you're talking about gaming.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about these issues of like GM versus player, like if you focus on the collaborative storytelling aspect,
Yep.
right? If you step away from the mechanics and you step away from rule sets and focus on just telling a story together with your friends, it can be such an invigorating and kind of engaging activity
Mhm.
that I think that's where the conversation can end, right? Like I
Yes.
don't know that system matters,
Yeah.
right? I don't know that mechanics matter. They help, right?
Sure.
But ultimately, when we sit down at a table with a pen, a pencil, and a piece of paper, it's about telling a story together and having fun and joining in a community with people who are just engaged in the same activity.
Right.
It's not about winning. It's not about outrolling. It's about enjoying each other's company.
Yep.
And having this kind of collaborative conversation.
You're entering
about
another
the,
world.
Yeah, about the story you want to tell as a group.
Yeah.
And I think that's what RPGs are all about.
Yep. Well said. For those of you who tuned in live, thank you. I just want to say thank you, Dovahkiin Templar, Mike Kemp, Deviator, Roxy, all you guys that showed up on YouTube, Danny, Tristan. Good luck with your game, Tristan. I hope your game goes well, and I hope your group is cool. DoD Spec Ops, thanks as always for your support.
Feel free to hit that subscribe button if you want to see us every week. We're also on Twitch at twitchtv.initiativecoffeeco.
Yeah.
Check out The Bard's Tale. Check out D&D with High School Kids. I'm sure most of you already have if you're here.
Yeah, and it's we'll keep the gravy train rolling. We'll be back next week with some more topics, some more things to share. But in the meantime, go ahead and feel free to leave us a note, comment. If there's any topics you'd like us to explore, to talk about, or if there's something new on the horizons of gaming that you think you'd like us to see or check out or review, let us know. And like Brian said, make sure you subscribe, hit that notifications button, and thanks as always for watching. We'll see you next week on Rise and Roll.
Roll together.